Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about the One Punch Man. Season 1, ultimately on Hulu, I had found out that, reasonably, we have One Punch Man now, first season being dubbed in English. I'm like, hey, here's my time to actually review this, because ultimately I've reviewed season 2. So now I'm like, hey, it's now about that time to go back into season 1 and realize how much fun I had watching this season. I think honestly, for me, when looking back at this now, looking back at this first season, I'm very much getting My Hero Academia vibes through this show. Because I'm like, God, I think My Hero Academia ruins this show for me now. God, that sucks. Because I'm just having weird flashbacks of My Hero Academia a lot, and it's messing me up. So, when going into this show, we have mainly two characters focused, and then everyone else eventually gets into the fray. We, at the end of the day, have Saitama and Genos, who are the two key people. Saitama, of course, who is One Punch Man, and Genos, who is seemingly some cyborg-esque like person that eventually is consistently trying to up the ante of his tech abilities to fight villains per episode, but eventually gets to the point of just falling apart or otherwise just having one-off like weaponry that completely isn't strong enough to take anybody down. So going into this, I thought that this show was really fun and interesting. I think there's a lot of comedy points if you've never seen this show before. There's a lot of times where mistakes do happen, and I think that they're really funny. We have Saitama accidentally hit a man in the junk because ultimately he bizarrely lands right there onto Saitama's fist. And I thought that that was really funny. We eventually have it to where Saitama is shouting every single thing that he does for a workout to make him who he was. We really have it to where Genos is desperately wanting to be under the mentorish, like, learning tree of Saitama, but Saitama has nothing to really give him. No real kernels of knowledge. If anything, he's just kind of making things up because reasonably he just does not care, or reasonably he just wants Genos to go away so Saitama can do whatever he wants while Genos is gone. So, really, within this show, we have usually One Punch Man being the last defense because everybody is getting annihilated. Really, we have Saitama that eventually is taking out so many people, but never really taking any credit. So, reasonably, the very first season is such a funny thing whenever we see that seemingly no one gives a rip about One Punch Man, and he's like, "What the, like, dude? Like, I'm decking everybody. I'm taking everybody out, and no one cares. Like, I'm not getting one dime for every single time that I take out everybody. What kind of garbage is this?" So yeah, I thought that this show was so, like, when I first watched it, I'm like, God, this show is so refreshing. It's so fun, and I really thought that this I really thought that this show was like a Deadpool-ish like way of doing things before there was cementingly me seeing a real Deadpool movie and this and that. Now that we have two Deadpool movies, I'm like, okay, well, like Deadpool is the main tier example because it's been in the mainstream where not everyone likes anime, but also at the end of the day, One Punch Man, people have heard a lot about it. There's been a ton of YouTube videos talking about, hey, who would win, Superman or Saitama? Who would win? One Punch Man versus Superman, or like you would get those kind of videos. You would get kind of the comparisons to who would win. Would Saitama be able to one punch Superman and kill him, which wouldn't happen because reasonably Saitama doesn't have kryptonite. Just the weird thought processes of everybody. And but again, you would probably think that Saitama would probably win, right? No. Anyways, I think that's where my fascination about One Punch Man started, was just the fact that people were telling me, like, with one fist this guy could annihilate anybody. And so I was like, well, okay, so I guess I need to know something about this character. And then surefire enough, it was like, oh, this is an anime. Ah, okay, all right. So good luck trying to find where that is. I ended up having to like scour the internet when I first, or scour the eBay or Amazon to find the first season dubbed in English, because I couldn't really find it anywhere. There wasn't an easy like there wasn't like Funimations and all kinds of stuff when I was trying to look for this. So it was just like, okay, well, I guess I'll just like find it on eBay somewhere. And luckily enough, I found an English dubbed version of One Punch Man. I was like, yeah, let's watch this. And I thought it was hilarious. So I think that is all that I want to say for these first 6 episodes, and for a non-spoiler like sense. Then we'll get into spoilers here shortly. One thing that I want to leave off is, one, if you haven't seen this, definitely you can go out of your way to say that you saw it now by going on to Hulu. Hulu. I thought that this show was fun. I thought it was funny, and I thought that reasonably I liked the visuals of this show. This show had so many odd and or different visuals than anything else out there. When I reasonably saw anime, and I still think that this show has interesting looking visuals compared to a lot of other, like, you could say it's like, well, no, this and My Hero Academia the same thing, or this and so show are basically the same thing. Yeah, you could make that consensus, but also I thought that this show makes fun of things. It's a parody show. It's a show where the hero does not give a crap. And I think that's actually better within this season. Like, in the second season, I honestly don't like the second season. I enjoy the first season. I think I just, like, did not care at all for the second season. It's like, God, the second season, you guys took such a long time to put that second season out, and I honestly just didn't care for it, to be brutally honest. Because basically within that second season, we have, like, an unstoppable villain, and we have, like, Saitama, who could care less about anything, to the point of him, like, taking so much time to do irrelevant stuff in season 2. Where in this first season, you actually have him actually fight people, and the episodes are really funny, they're really fun, and plus you still have that Saitama that doesn't care about taking down the villain. All he cares about is taking down a grocery list of and buying groceries. So anyways, let's go into spoilers about this review, the first 6 episodes of this. I'm going to talk about these with you. So, spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this show, the first 6 episodes. I should have saw more. I probably could have saw more, but when looking at it, I was like, well, there's probably going to be a lot of names that I'm probably not going to remember. So, if anything, ultimately, it's probably best to just kind of like start out kind of slow and just kind of work my way up. Because ultimately, with anime, it's really hard to review just because it's not exactly easy to like have like a real true like catalog of who appeared on one episode and an easy imagery, excuse me, an easy image and stuff like that to tie everything to. Because if you look it up on IMDb, you have like one person doing like 600 voices, and it's like, well, this is gonna be tough to look up. So you really need to know who everyone is. And so recently, if I don't, I'm like, like you really like for me, I just have trouble with names. I do, and like to ultimately review an anime is just God. I'm gonna mispronounce so many things, or otherwise, I'm not even gonna remember anyone's name. I'll just have to describe some characters at some point. So going into these first 6 episodes, we have it to where Genos is seemingly trying to fight out consistently, but without a doubt, he ends up being a destroyed mess. In the very early episode, we have it to where seemingly every hero is just being completely demolished by this new alien-ish like villain and really just tearing through the city. But then eventually we get it to where there are other heroes that arise. Eventually we have the alien villain eventually kind of go away and fade away to eventually come back some other day. So while that is going on, we at some points have these underground dwellers that end up appearing upon Saitoma's like way, or they end up surfacing these underground dwellers to take down whoever hero is standing. We have characters that are heroes like Moomin Rider that ultimately seems like he's riding around on a bike. Really, for Moomin Rider, I was like, God, Moomin Rider is such like he like everyone is like, yeah, Moomin Rider, but what was the whole fascination with Moomin Rider? I don't know. To me, it was just like a person that, like, when going into season 2, when he shows up in there, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, Moomin Rider, I remember him. What a goofy character that I didn't. In this show, like, I don't think Moomin Rider really even does anything, but surefire enough, like, people are just like, oh my god, that's Moomin Rider. And plus, Moomin Rider is gets credit for something that Saitama does. And excuse me for a minute. Sip break. We have it to where Moomin Rider takes the credit for a thing Saitama does, and Saitama just loses it, which I thought was funny. But anyways, we have it within here that One Punch Man is taking down these underground dwellers. He's taking down similarly all these shaved-headed men that all look exactly like him in these seemingly armor-wielding super strength suits, to where Saitama has to take them all down, to where the seemingly head of this whole gang has to use the full power of his suit to go against Saitama. So, also within this episode, we have Genos eventually, or not in this episode exactly. We eventually, at some point within these episodes, we have Genos fighting some very seductive, like, insect woman, where she uses her seemingly feminine wilds, because ultimately this girl, like, you can tell, like, her bug suit just looks like so painted on to her skin where you can almost just see everything, really. And yeah, you basically have Genos who, as of course per usual through every episode, even when he gets an upgrade for his, he gets like an arm mode and this and that, like nothing is good enough. Basically, all this stuff gets completely annihilated, and then here we go again with Saitama coming his way to evade and this and that. And usually Genos is getting all the credit for all the stuff that One Punch Man is doing because Genos was in the area. So reasonably within here, we have also this tank top tiger hero, which I was like, God, this guy's hair is yellow and brown, and he has eyebrows that are also yellow and brown. I guess that's probably his natural hair color, but I just thought it was just like, God, this guy is goofy as F. You have the tank top that is, of course, tank top tiger. So, like, I'm just like, I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, what a goofy cat. We also have this one slingshot like hero that shoots out these like golden balls for people to get hit by. And we also have this swordsman of sorts that is going up against some villain ash like character for this episode, or for one episode where it has this like seaweed looking like monster. Thought it was weird looking. We also have this very long stretched out name of some character that throws daggers at people, and ultimately I think some portion of his name is like Sonic, which I thought was weird. But I think this guy has a really weird stretched out name to where Saitama can't even like remember what it is for he was like trying to figure out what it was, and then the guy reset it again and he's like, oh yeah, that's your name. Which I don't remember even what his name is when he said it twice. Hence my memory, but anyways. We have it within here that we also have this white fanged like character because there has to be some really old karate fighting like Splinter-esque looking character that has to be a hero of sorts. There always has to be that guy. I'm like, man, like, yeah, you kind of at some points have to like do like a stereotypical kind of approach to some of these heroes, or just hey, just have a guy with the sword, or have a guy with a bat, or have a guy with just some gimmick of some weird kind. So anyways, within this early episode, we find out that Saitama became a hero because ultimately there was some crab-esque looking monster that was picking on a kid with a butt chin, and so really Saitama came to this guy's evade, or this kid's evade, and ultimately we found out that this crab monster, someone had drew nipples on his chest, which ultimately is with permanent marker, and so reasonably the crab can't even grab any towel to wipe this marker off, even if he could. And so that is what has got him and so much enraged to try to fight people. So Saitama eventually goes into fighting this crabbish like man, and eventually loses to where it pushes him to want to train ridiculously hard to be able to be a hero. Funny enough, we have it to where One Punch Man mentions, it's like, yeah, like, I did push-ups so much that my arms were popping. but I kept doing push-ups anyways. And you have you have eventually to the point to where Saitama mentions every single thing that he does to work out, and everyone else really is like, how could you have mastered and been able to be as strong as you are by doing that kind of workout? It makes no sense. Eventually, Genos is really wanting to get under the learning tree of One Punch Man, so really he's asking for advice. And even in one episode, like Saitama is not really understanding what thing to actually teach Genos, so ultimately he just makes stuff up. He just starts looking around in his apartment and starts putting stuff together to tell Genos that he needs to try to the way that he'll succeed is not through some kind of tech advancement. Is really just he needs to work with his mind, and reasonably try to achieve a goal of being able to get within the top 10 of his class, which is class X or class S. So we eventually, within these first 6 episodes, have seemingly Saitama not getting the credit from anybody, and so reasonably he just gets so frustrated that he's like, okay, how is it that I can finally get credit for doing all the stuff that I'm doing? Because everyone else is getting credit but me, and I'm getting frustrated now. Like, I don't want everybody to be, like, screaming and hollering my name, but god dang it, like, I'm getting tired of people all... like, I'm one-punching my way through people, and no one cares. So, Genos tells Saitama that he has to go and get registered to be a hero, and so ultimately, eventually, we will get there. Because really, Saitama has to know all the qualifications, what all he needs to do, and this and that. So, and eventually he will put into whatever class he gets. I think reasonably he ends up getting into like the lowest of the low as far as scale goes and has to work his way up. Even though his scores are probably higher than I don't know, they just eventually just put him into a seemingly a lower rung compared to Genos. So, but we have it to where we find out that the heroes, they get donations from people in the city, to where One Punch Man could possibly, for every time that he takes someone out, he can possibly get a donation from the city. So that way, instead of this actually being just a hero for fun like thing, he can actually get paid for doing it. And also, he will actually finally get credit on the news for him actually doing this instead of Moomin Rider or Genos or someone else that comes into the fray at any day. So, going into this, we have interesting heroes. Like at some point, I think Tornado shows up, which is a girl with like weirdly green hair, and her power is just spawning tornadoes at some point. But yeah, we have some underground dwellers. We have this gang that shows up. We even at some point have this one monster that looks like half car, half muscle man, and eventually he is yet another person that kind of sticks his face right into Saitama, and Saitama gives him the what for. And yeah, so reasonably we just have a interesting cluster of characters, and reasonably within the show, we have these funny moments where Saitama is no selling, or in these terms, somebody punches the crap out of him and he doesn't even move. That's what I think is funny about this, is when we consistently have it to where somebody does this massive punch thinking that One Punch Man is dead and he hasn't even moved. He's just like, "Hey, was that the best you could give me? Was your grandma working that day? Was your grandma working me over? Like, come on, like throw some steak on that Barbie here. Give me something." Like like this like this is what everyone has to fear. This is what I think a lot of the times it should have just been that One Punch Man should have just challenged everybody. Anybody who was the best, whether it was hero, whether it was villain, just ultimately see if any number of those people could have actually could have actually just given him a run for his money. So then ultimately he could finally say, okay, this is the linchpin of where, like, okay, I finally know one person that could actually could actually give me an actual run for my money, and then great, there is an equalizer somewhere. Because what if One Punch Man ends up like, for example, when Superman would throw on some red kryptonite, all of a sudden he would be a villain. Like, what happens if One Punch Man just like ends up uh, going crazy one day, or gets gassed, or hallucinates, or a any number of things. There could be one episode where One Punch Man just annihilates heroes because he's blindfolded and he can't really see. It could happen. He could be blind one episode. But anyways, mood point. So we have it in here to where Genos is an interesting character, and eventually is just a person to fall apart. We have Saitama, who is eventually looking at anything but really being a hero, and but you have him being better than any of the top tier heroes out there, and eventually that is all to really be said within the show. So yeah, it's an interesting show with some interesting villains, but ultimately a lot of the episodes are just kind of, there's goofy looking villains that don't quite make sense to me. I'm like, okay, these are the weirdest looking characters that I've ever seen in my life. But that's the best thing about this show. Every single one of the characters are weird looking. You have One Punch Man with a weird looking onesie. It's very interesting to eventually get the backstory of that onesie, because it really doesn't make sense to me how this character gets a suit that he does. Because I'm like, okay, like this costume doesn't make any rational sense, because it's the most blandest looking costume. Like, you would have thought that he would have had like some symbol, or you would have like, why the cape? You would have, like, I'm kind of interested to have seen like what was the early sketches of One Punch Man before they got to the initial thing. Was there always a cape there? Were they trying to make him as much like Superman as possible? And this and that. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to just kind of say at the end of the day. It's probably going to be a kind of shorter review for a lot of this, but I thought that the show was funny. There was some moments when you had Saitama that was seeming like he was giving anybody a kernel of knowledge, but really he wasn't. You have all these people that want to be just like Saitama, and Saitama doesn't even understand why. It's like, hey man, like I don't know how this all worked out for me, but I guess it just did. You have Saitama that is looking at which anime to read, while Genos is going off to need to talk to uh, his hero, Class S society, and Saitama is making the joke of like, well, hey, maybe they're firing you. Like, hey, I'm just joking. See you later. Cause yeah, like Saitama knows that Genos is just an awful hero that just never really does anything successful, but Saitama has given him like basically all the credit to be the best hero, but so that is the thing. Like I just don't quite understand how Genos is the most successful hero, but he fails all the time. So how did he get to Class S? God dang it, I keep saying X. Class S when he's like the worst hero that doesn't succeed at what he does. How did he get that far? That makes no sense. And because I guess reasonably maybe he's just fighting tougher and tougher villains, which every single time he's losing, to where ultimately Saitama comes in, punches somebody, decks people, and Saitama and Genos gets all the credit. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about this review. Yeah, reasonably I'm just gonna watch some of the other episodes, and ultimately, hopefully, anybody would like this review and wants me to continue. Reasonably, for me, it was just kind of going over, like, again, just really refreshing myself on these characters again, and just going, yeah, like, this is giving me like a lot of Hero Academia vibes. And so reasonably, I think My Hero is the real mainstream of this, where like One Punch Man is really just the parody or the goofy or the joking around of things, and that's what I like about it. Is it doesn't take itself seriously. It's kind of like uh it's kind of like The Mask. It's kind of like the real true just parody of the superhero genre, which that's what I appreciate about it. Is it's always to just have more than just fun. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.